Hello and welcome to Module 9. Woohoo! So, if you've taken any other classes at Southern New Hampshire, which I believe you probably had to before you got to this class, you recognize that Module 9 is really when we do the final submission. This is when the biggest assignment of the whole class is due. So it's very important. So there's good news and bad news. Good news is that you've already done most of the work, okay? It's just a matter of refining what you've done and putting it in and kind of compiling it in a revised format. The not so good news is that you have to do a little chunk of work on this one, okay? But before we get started, I want you to repeat after me. Seriously, I'm serious. Repeat after me. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. All right, so now we just had a little affirmation there. We're just gonna break this down step by step and work through it, and it's gonna be okay. So let's go ahead and get right to it. So we'll go ahead and look at the learning objectives. Okay, so basically, this sounds like really a lot of whatever. Basically, we're just combining what we've done up to this point in time. So you can interpret that any way you particularly want. So don't worry about that, because we're going to talk about that more in detail when we get to the assignment. Okay. The module overview. Okay, so basically, this is good information. What I take from this is that understand that right now in your life you are at a certain place. Okay, and that whatever you write in your final project here is really kind of a snapshot of right now of what you think is going to happen, how you're going to integrate, editing and coaching and mentoring, the things that we've learned about in this class, and how you foresee yourself using these in a way that would be that would fit what you're going to do, with the understanding that things change over time. Your plan will change as you and your career evolve, but at least you need to go in with a plan. Okay, just consider this almost like the writing process. You're putting down your draft as of right now, and as life progresses, you're going to be making revisions. So that's just something to keep in mind. So understand that this is you're something like, well, what's the point of doing this, because it's not going to be the same thing when I start doing it later on, or it's going to change in 5 years. Well, yeah, probably will change in 5 years, but at least you'll have an idea of what to change. Okay, so we still need to do this. What's the point of doing revision? Because what's the point of doing the first draft? Because I'm just going to have to revise it anyway. Well, that doesn't make any sense. So anyway, just that concept here. All right, let's go do the next part. Module at the glance. It's pretty straightforward. Submit the final project. Okay, well, there you go. And that's pretty much the module at a glance. Alrighty, so for the final submission project, boom, 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 boom. Alright, so let's go ahead and break it down. Alright, this can be very intimidating. You look at this and you go, oh my goodness, what's going on? So let's just kind of, again, this is kind of the philosophy, the why. If you want to read all this, the overview, the why of what we're doing. It's basically, how you are going to incorporate this into your life and your career goals. That's kind of everything that we're going to be doing. Okay, so don't get overwhelmed by looking at the overview. The prompt is basically, you've looked at, your philosophies and how you revise work, and the power of the peer feedback, all sorts of different things. So basically everything that we've done in this course to this point in time, we're going to incorporate into this. And it's really, again, it seems very intimidating, but not really, because there's 3 parts of this final project, okay? And you've basically already done them, at least first drafts of them, okay? So there's part 1, which is you will explain your philosophy on coaching and mentoring, and we'll talk about that. There's part 2, where you will explain your pedagogical philosophy in the form of a cover letter or promotional material. Well, you've done that. Okay, great, fantastic. Okay, and part 3, you will propose a career plan of how editing and coaching will inform you, of your short-term and long-term goals. Well, that was a project that we did as well. So basically, you've done all of these projects, and each one of these projects you submitted to your classmates and to me to get feedback. Okay, so it's not just enough to say, oh, I've done this, I'm just going to copy and paste and put it in there. I've done this, I'm going to copy and paste it and put it in there. I've done this, I'm going to copy and paste it in this. What you need to do is go back and look at the feedback that I gave you and your peers gave you and polish these up. Okay, and so like I said, you have something to work from. You don't have to write these from scratch, okay? Because that would be, oh gosh, it'd be that scare me to death, okay? And then here are the specific things that need to be graded. And this is the same stuff that's on the syllabus. So I'm just going to let you read through this, okay? These are the different things. But again, these were all part of the assignment from before. All right, so these are just the things that you had to do on these assignments. This is the philosophy on coaching and mentoring, okay? These are the things you had to do. So just make sure you went through that. Look at the feedback that you got. Were you clear on this? Make it even more clear if you need to, okay? The second thing is the cover letter or promotional material. Again, these are things that you did. Promote your, whatever. Use the feedback. Whatever, okay, not whatever, but use the feedback you got to clean it up and polish it up even more. And then career plan in coaching and editing, okay, and then this is that big project you did that you wrote in Module 7, and then you got feedback in from me and your peers, and so you're going to be going through this, okay. Now, how does this all put together? What are we supposed to do? Well, part 1 is this, philosophy. It's basically just a 2 to 3 page paper, which is kind of what you'd done before. It's an MLA formatting, and again, it's just something you've done before that you're just going to clean up and refine, and so then that's not going to be too bad. Okay. The cover letter, which is the part 2. Okay, this is the same thing you did before. Some of you did cover letters, some of you did promotional materials. I gave you feedback, your peers gave you feedback. Go through, refine that, clean it up, make it even nicer. Okay, and I'll explain why this is important, that you just don't use what you did before, because it's a little different. Okay, and then the last one is the career path, and that says between 8 and 10 pages. Okay, well, I'm not super hung up on the page length as much as you cover and clearly cover all the material, because when I get down here to the rubric, okay, so when you hear the rubrics, basically it's like, did you do these particular things? Okay, there's part 1. Part 2, did you do this in the cover letter? Boom, boom, boom. Okay, and then part 3, okay, did you do this? Boom, 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 boom. Do you see anywhere here where it says it has to be 8 to 10 pages? I don't think so. Okay, but chances are it's going to be about that length, because you're going to need that to cover all these different elements. Okay, now one bit of advice / warning. Now, Southern New Hampshire they set up the grading scale, they set up the rubrics and all that kind of stuff, and I followed their procedures. So up to this point in time, these things that you had done before were fairly, the grading scale was fairly liberal. Basically, as long as you kind of just did the thing, you got full points. And basically, as long as you stated a pedagogical philosophy and you gave an example, you got full points. Okay. And that was for the previous assignments. Now, for the final project, it's a lot more challenging, okay? Before we basically had, yeah, you did it, you kind of did it, or you didn't do it. This one has different categories, okay? And they are more significant, okay? So agree with distinction. What does that even mean, okay? Agree with distinction, it means that you have demonstrated performance with exceptional insight, okay? So that means you have to kind of really go above and beyond what you had done before. What does that mean, exceptional insight? Well, because is that a very subjective thing for me as a professor? No, I'll tell you how exactly I'm going to look for it. Basically, let's give an example here. Explains the coaching and mentoring approach to employ based on your philosophy. Okay, so let's say you explain this. Then you have to give me a reason why or an example. Okay, for me, that gives me the exceptional insight. It's not just enough to state something, you have to back it up with evidence or with reasoning. Okay, so that's really what I'm looking for. Did you have a pedagogical philosophy? Okay, give me the example. Why? Okay, so again, I'm looking for evidence to back it up. Okay, so it's actually fairly hard, not fairly hard, but it's a challenge. And for you to get an agree with distinction, you kind of need to kind of go above and beyond. Agree is, like the 90 percentile mark. Okay, agree with reservation is you kind of mentioned it, but you didn't really back it up at all. Okay, disagree is you didn't really do it at all, or whatever, or it's not evident. Disagree is like, my pedagogical approach is that Subway is a good place to eat. Well, I disagree that that's even a thing, for coaching and mentoring. Okay, anyway. So this is how this is going to be. This is graded a lot harsher and a lot more critically than all the rest of the assignments. And to make it even more fun, this whole assignment is worth 400 points, as opposed to most of your assignments being worth 10 or 25, some of the bigger ones being worth 70. So this is a huge, huge chunk of your grade. Okay, now I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just trying to give you the way that we're looking at it. So how would I approach if I were you? Well, I would just take it step by step. First of all, I would go back to part 1 and I would find that assignment that I turned in. I would look at the feedback that Professor Morgan gave you, and generally the feedback that I gave you is like, this is a strong point you made and this is another strong point you made. So maybe take that feedback and add that, some of the examples, not saying, you don't have to quote me, but think about, I said, look, you really made a good point on this and point on this. Maybe elaborate a little bit more on that, because those were strong elements of this. Or when you got peer feedback, if they said, hey, I recommend this, well, then really take that to heart and, make those changes. If you just submit what you did before, it's going to be agree with reservation at the very best, okay? Because you have to show me that you've revised what you've done before. It takes me a long time to grade these, okay? Because I take this very seriously, but I want you to do the best work possible. Okay, after you've done that, then look at your cover letter, okay? And then say, okay, look at the feedback that Professor Morgan gave you and your peers. Same thing. Generally, I said, hey, these are the things I saw that worked well. Sometimes I said these are some recommendations I would do. So play on your strengths, really polish up the things that you did, maybe, again, go back through and read it, make some changes. And then the big one is the career path. Okay. This is where you're really going to have to, look at the feedback, and I will try to give you more detailed feedback. It's a pretty big project, but from both me and your peers on what you're going to be doing, and then clean that up. But again, as long as you are abundantly clear that you're talking about these different things, if I have to go hunting and try to find out, did they talk about career goals? Are they talking about techniques here, or editing techniques? I mean, really, almost you need a paragraph for each one of these things where you're blatantly telling me, hey, this is what I'm covering now, so that I can understand, okay, and that's just good organizational strategy, especially when it comes to an academic paper. Not necessarily the way we'd approach a creative writing paper, but that's not this. This is a academic paper. So really an organizational strategy is, hey, this is your outline. What? Yeah. How about that? Maybe start off with the topic sentence and then give your statement and then give up evidence and then have a concluding statement before you move on to your next paragraph, or maybe have a couple of paragraphs for each of these. What an idea. So I'm just trying to give you some ideas of how to do this. Again, this is going to take a little time. Good news is that you've already done first drafts for all of these, so you just need to kind of clean it up and, kind of internalize the feedback you gave me and then put it together. All right, so hopefully that's not too scary. Well, it's a little scary, but it definitely is the final project, so it's going to take some time and effort. Okay, so there's that, and then you would just upload the files there, and then I can grade them. Okay, and then what else we got going on for this module? That's it. Then we go to Module 10. Okay, so Module 9. Please email me. I will. Where am I going to be? I am spending the last 2 weeks of July out of the state. I'm actually going to be, and this was planned way in advance. My mom has been moved to a assisted facility, and we're selling the house that we grew up in. So I'm going to be spending the last 2 weeks kind of cleaning out and selling the house that we grew up in. But I will be in contact. I will be checking my email at least every 24 hours, and I will still be grading things. I've set aside the time to do that. But understand that I will not be checking my email multiple times a day, probably once a day at best. So make sure that if you factor that in. All right, so that's it for Module 9, the big module. Get her done. Don't wait till Sunday to do this, because that's going to be a problem. All right, let's finish with a bang. All right, let's do this.